It's finally time to leave all what's past behind me. I've made up my
Look,
mind.
you already know water is the key to all life on this planet. And if it gets polluted, it affects the living things on it, in it, and drinking it, including you and me. Here's the deal. Scientists know that this clean-looking water here is about to become a serious water quality issue. Now, it won't happen overnight, but it will happen. Because this place has a documented history of what happens as a result of what's about to happen up that river. So join us on a series of water conservation investigations, searching for sources and solutions to pollution as we head into the outdoors.
Into the outdoors. Grab your gear and let's explore as we discover the wild outdoors. Science, discovery, it's what we do. Into the outdoors, now what you waiting for? Into the outdoors, it's fun when we explore. Science, discovery, it's way too cool. You can make our Earth a bright and better place by joining us in this wide open space. Into the outdoors.
So what's your first step in environmental investigation? Build yourself a foundation of knowledge. And a great place to start is with the history.
Since I've moved into this area, I've seen it get progressively worse. The blue-green algae has gotten to a point where I can't use the water at all. The DNR will give us data that says it's actually impaired 92 out of the 100 recreational days in the summer. There's times when the blue-green algae is toxic. We had hives. People that I've talked to have lupus conditions and other medical impacts. You know that you can't use the water, and you hope that nobody will go in it either. The entire water surface is matted with blue, and you don't even want to stand there because the smell is so bad. The stench is unbearable.
There's a certain kind of algae called blue-green algae, and it produces cyanobacteria. And cyanobacteria is a toxin. It's a poison, and that is the problem, is that we now have huge bodies of water in our state that are full of a toxin that's detrimental to all the animals that live around the lake, including us.
So the river we just came down is one of the sources?
It is the major source of nutrients to Tainter Lake. The other tributary that comes in from the northwest is the Hay River. We have a rainfall event, and that rainfall event falls at such a rate that it exceeds the soil or the land's capacity to absorb the water, and it's no longer absorbing it, it will run downhill. And then it gets concentrated in small channels to bigger channels and eventually delivered to the Red Cedar River, which enters right behind us here into this delta area on Tainter Lake. And associated with that, as the main concern we have, is the pollutant phosphorus, which stimulates the summer algal blooms on this lake. After World War II, what happened, we started developing inorganic fertilizers to produce our corn crops and alfalfa on farms. And the other thing we did at that time is we started feeding our dairy cattle in Wisconsin a mineral supplement that was very high in phosphorus. Well, part of that mineral goes through that cow. It doesn't all stay in her bones. And so those and our communities had to get rid of their waste, right? So all the communities upstream of Tainter Lake have a sewage treatment plant that discharges sewage treatment plant effluent to the Red Cedar system. What we have to find a way is how do we still produce those foods, that milk, that meat, those commodities we need that fills the grocery store up and still doesn't pollute the water. And we have some very promising opportunities, especially in the Red Cedar Basin right now. We're having some farmers taking extremely proactive solutions to that problem. We can either control the source of phosphorus, the amount placed on the land, or the ability of that land to generate runoff. That's the transport mechanism, is the land and the runoff associated with it. So farmers are really working very well on both of those fronts. And then we're doing many things out there on the landscape to slow that water down to get more of it to infiltrate, so we have less runoff, less potential for phosphorus to be delivered to Tainter Lake. We also have farmers teaching one another about how to grow their commodities, farm their land, and produce clean water in the runoff.
It's all about cooperation between farmers and local conservation agencies.
We're finally starting to get to people to come together and understand how they, as individuals, impact water quality.
To learn more about water pollution solutions in your classroom, go to intotheoutdoors.org. Coming up, let's explore some urban challenges in protecting water quality.
Don't go away. There's more Into the Outdoors. And now back into the outdoors.
Whew, you can't smell it, but this is a wastewater treatment facility. And as impressive as it looks, it only represents a drop in the bucket of keeping all the water clean in Lake Michigan. And there's a lot more going on that we can't see. Such as the massive deep tunnel system underground that helps capture for cleaning 98% of the water that enters the sewer system. All of that is part of the gray infrastructure that helps capture and clean the sewer and runoff water in the Milwaukee Metropolitan Sewer-Rich District. But that's only part of the science and technology of the cost of clean water here.
The Clean Water Act passed in 1972. We already knew we had a problem. The lake was polluted. We had problems with polluted beaches, bad drinking water. And so what we did was we came in and we built a huge tunnel system underground. It's about 300 feet below ground.
300 feet? That's the size of a football field. Go Packers!
Yeah. And the purpose is, when it rains, to capture that large water flow before it goes into the rivers and drop it 300 feet into the deep tunnel. And it really is just a big bathtub. It just holds all that water down there. Well, if you spread 1 inch of rain over the entire area of Milwaukee, it equates to about 7 billion gallons of water. And the tunnel captures part of that water. It captures all the sanitary flow as well. All the water that's used in a house is captured either in the tunnel or through the treatment plants during these heavy storms. And then we start pumping that water up from the tunnel and pass that through the treatment plant so it's clean before it goes back into Lake Michigan.
So this is the gray infrastructure, but what's the green infrastructure we've been hearing about?
Well, green infrastructure really is what it sounds like. It's a lot of using nature to treat that stormwater. We're trying to help people understand that they need to manage water where it falls. So you can build a rain garden in your backyard. You can put a green roof on a building and use that water over. Put a rain barrel at the bottom of a downspout. So it's holding that water until you can use it later to water your plants. But what we really are looking to work on now is stormwater. And stormwater runoff that really has a lot of pollutants in it. So this is both urban areas and farm areas, trying to manage that non-point pollution that runs into the rivers and try to bring together all these different technologies and different natural approaches to try to manage that pollution, to reduce flooding, to improve the water quality in our region.
Now we get it. Improving the gray infrastructure over the past 20 years made a big difference in protecting the quality of these waters. Now it's time for us, you know, you and me, to become part of the next phase to keeping our Lake Michigan watersheds clean by joining the green revolution. I'm sure by now you're wondering, what does this green infrastructure look like and how does it work? Let's look at a place that has a reputation for being green in more ways than one.
Well, it all starts with the rain, right? The rain comes down, it hits the surface of the glass domes, it goes into the troughs you can see at the base, and it funnels right into this wonderful concrete bed of permeable and porous pavers.
This looks like solid brick to me. Are you sure?
I am positive. There is a very sturdy structure under here that holds granite chips that filter the water that's coming through, whether from the rain or off the domes, and it's held to use for a lot of different purposes.
Really?
We're recycling, we're sustainable. This is recycled water that we've pumped up for a lot of things. One, of course, is that kids love to play in it in the summer, but another use is to water our perennial garden right over there. So water is a precious commodity, and the more we can recapture and reuse, it's all good stuff.
Talk about recycling.
But now we're going to talk about another way we capture that water. So follow me, we're going up. Here is what I'm talking about. Here is the green roof. This is another way to capture water and reuse it and sustain plant life. So what we're looking at, and oh, I'm seeing bees, I'm seeing pollinators.
Some pollinators in.
But for the most part, this roof has been completely self-sufficient. Each of these caps that you're going to see are capable of holding 20,000 gallons of recycled water. There's 4 of these, which equals 80,000 gallons. We capture from the sky, from the runoff from our greenhouses, and that's what we use to provide water to water the plants in the greenhouses. We have the water we take from the roof, recycle. It goes through a computer system that programs these emitters, is what the water comes out of from the recycled roof, and it could be fertilized or otherwise, and that's what drops the amount of water we need to grow our plants. This is just one other way that we reuse our recycled water.
Let's learn about this.
It's a great way to cool the plants and, of course, us. That water we're talking about is literally dripping through these pads, and the fan is drawing that cooled water over the plants. They need to be cool too.
So you can see the water, right? But what you don't see is the H2O molecules literally being torn apart and being blown by the wind onto these plants. What a cool system. Is there any other way you guys recycle water here?
Well, actually there is. In our bathrooms, we have a full flush and a half flush.
1 second, I gotta try out more of this recycled water.
Discover how you can create green infrastructures at intotheoutdoors.org. Coming up next, the earth science behind Karst Country.
Don't go away. There's more Into the Outdoors. And now back into the outdoors.
Sometimes we can actually see water contamination happening. Like a surface pipe discharging polluted water into a lake. Not good. When it comes from a place like that, water quality scientists call it point source pollution. Any guesses what they call it when they can't pinpoint a specific source? Non-point source pollution. Now, things really get complicated when non-point sources pollute groundwater below the surface that you can't even see. And when you add something called KARST topography, it takes some serious detective work to figure out causes and cures.
Okay, so when it rains, you've got a water drop going through the atmosphere. It's going to mix with the carbon dioxide and make a very weak acid called carbonic acid. When that weak acid hits the ground surface and it starts soaking in, it can actually start dissolving the rock. You're going to take these cracks and you're going to make them a whole lot bigger.
With all these cracks running down here, what does that mean for groundwater in an area like this?
Well, it means a couple of things. One, it means that the water can go from the ground surface into the aquifer really fast. And 2, if there's any pollution sitting up there at the ground surface, it can go into the aquifer really fast too.
A direct pathway for water and possible pollution. If pollution can get into groundwater from almost anywhere here, let's see, there's a farm, there's an orchard, a few houses, a business, oh man. Where do we begin looking, and how can science help get us answers? This limestone at surface really looks cool.
Yeah, but if you look at the amount of topsoil, which is about 24 inches, that's the only protection you have towards the aquifer that you're getting your groundwater and drinking out of.
I thought dirt made water dirty. How is it protecting it?
You wouldn't think dirt cleans water, but this is how it works. The more dirt you have before it hits this rock formation, it takes out and cleanses the water and the impurities before it hits your groundwater.
The soil is a water filtration system. I get it. What else?
So the more protection, the more clay and topsoil that you have on top of your aquifer is a protection layer, because that clay takes up the nutrients, the bacteria, and soaks it up so that the plants can use it before it hits your groundwater.
What's the solution to pollution?
Conservation, nutrient management plans with farmers who are doing best management practices, or BMPs.
How do you know if it's coming from that farm or that church over there?
When we get a well that's contaminated in this kind of aquifer, we do what's called a microbial source tracking test. And that will tell us if it's either human or bovine.
Wait, you guys can figure out what kind of bacteria it is? How do you do that?
You're gonna have to talk to someone else on that.
Huh? Oh, hi. I don't know much about pathogens, but are you saying it's alive and we drink it?
Yeah, they're pretty much alive. Sometimes they need to reach a host before they become alive. A pathogen is a microorganism that causes illness in a person. And there are 3 basic types: protozoa, bacteria, and then the last group are the viruses. Viruses are very tiny. They're the ones that can reach groundwater the easiest. And that's why we disinfect our drinking water supplies for the most part, to kill these pathogens. When it rains and the water is moving downward, those pathogens move with the groundwater. And once they reach there, especially where we live here in Wisconsin, it's just the perfect environment for these pathogens to live.
Yeah, but how can you tell whether it's human or bovine?
So one of the ways of identifying the source is molecular or genetic fingerprinting. It's like using the fingerprint at a crime scene. And we pull out the DNA, it's specific to that pathogen. So when we detect it, we know that pathogen was there. And then if we find a suspected source where we have that same sequence, voila, we got it. We got the source.
Oh, I get it.
It doesn't happen all the time and everywhere. But when we go to other parts of the state, like in northeastern Wisconsin, where the groundwater comes from a fractured rock system, that's where we see 70% of the samples had some level of fecal contamination in them. That's very high.
That doesn't sound too good.
Not everybody likes to talk about manure, but it can be a problem. If handled improperly, let's say over-application manure, that manure can run off the soil and down into the crevice bedrock, causing groundwater pollution.
So you got manure, phosphate, and nitrogen here. I see a crack right there. And what does that do when people across the street drink the water?
Well, that's when you get well contamination. Nitrogen is not healthy for infant development. Phosphorus impacts surface waters. If the field is located in a karst topography and we can identify a bedrock feature such as a sinkhole, and we see that a manure application was applied and it ran off down that sinkhole, we can generally feel pretty certain that that's the cause of that pollution. Incorporating the manure, tilling the manure into the ground so that the manure has contact with the soil particles so that it stays put and doesn't leave the field.
Bottom line is that a lot of different factors here in karst country play a role in affecting the groundwater resource. And a lot of the solutions involve science.
Go to intotheoutdoors.org to learn about karst science in your classroom. Up next, we decode a landmark water study that's revitalizing trout streams.
Don't go away. There's more Into the Outdoors. And now back into the outdoors.
Now, I'd like to say that this pleasant stream is my secret fishing spot, but really, it's a place you should know all about. This is Pleasant Valley, and the story of what happened here and to this stream has set the stage for improving water quality in streams across America.
Studies done by DNR in conjunction with EPA collect enough data to show that the main impairment with the stream was sediment coming into the stream from agricultural lands.
We actually looked for a watershed of this size to do this pilot study because it's small enough that we could see an effect, and it's large enough that we're not just measuring one particular farm. So it was just the right size at about 20 square miles.
It takes different stakeholders to form a plan, and then to make it happen.
We had just an amazing team from all sorts of agencies of both government and then also nonprofits. So the Nature Conservancy played a really key role in bringing together all the agencies and with the farmers, and then also it had a research component to it.
The software was used for developing the plan, identifying where the hotspots were, and determining what kind of practices would reduce phosphorus losses in those hotspots.
What do you think could be the problems here?
See this rainstorm that's going on out here? If this was in April or early May, we could have severe erosion. Water would run off carrying soil and the associated nutrients. There are certain organisms and certain types of fish can only tolerate like 60-degree water temps. If we get 70 or 80-degree water temps in here because of excessive sediment and nutrients in the stream, those fish die.
Some of the science that helped decode the changes in water quality here happen inside that thing.
This is an automated sampler. What's really good about this is that it runs night and day, all times of the season. About 80% of the phosphorus load happens on only about 10 days out of all the 365 days in a year. So having this in, it allows us to be able to capture those events and really measure them well.
I think there's some more science around the next bend.
I'm going to take a sample of the soft sediment in the channel, and we do this up and down the river to get an idea of how much soft sediment there is and what the concentration of phosphorus is in it. Chemistry of this is what we can't see, and phosphorus in particular travels along with sediment, so that's why it's so important to measure sediment.
Want to see what happens when stakeholders take ownership of solutions?
The other thing that was really key with this study was that the farmers were involved from the start. And Dane County and the conservationists played a really key role.
They kind of came to us because we are a dairy farm and our phosphorus levels in our soil were one of the higher ones in the township. Well, they wanted us to actually do a little more minimum tillage, no tillage. And now with the new watershed project, some of the newer things we implemented just enhance some of the early things we've been doing for 50 years. We definitely try to stay off the more sloped ground and try to stay on more of the flat ground when we do the manure. So it minimizes any chance of more of it getting into the river system.
Preliminary results are showing that we're seeing a 40% reduction in phosphorus, and aquatic biology in the stream has improved. So the fisheries, and then also what the fish eat, which is why the DNR is looking at taking the stream off the impaired list.
What happened here in Pleasant Valley proves that watersheds like this all across the country can be scientifically evaluated. And, most importantly, duplicated with the success of partnerships, resulting in cleaner, quality water for all of us to enjoy. So really, it's a roadmap to improving water quality wherever you live.